I'm Mike Betty, and I'd like to give you an introduction to a fascinating scrapbook that I found a few years ago. It was compiled by a gentleman called Samuel Pickwick. Now, it's the Mr. Pickwick of the Pickwick Papers. Now, you've read the Pickwick Papers, you've seen it on the telly, but perhaps you don't remember Mr. Pickwick coming to Cambridge. However, I've spoken to the Pickwick Club that still meets in the George and Vulture Inn in Lombard Street, London. I've sat next to Mr. Pickwick, and I've shared with him what happened when he visited Cambridge in 1838. You see, some years ago, I was going through some playbills at the Cambridgeshire collection, and I found this one that said, Mr. Pickwick's first appearance in Cambridge. And I thought, well, if Mr. Pickwick did come to Cambridge in a year like 1838, he would have kept a notebook, and he would have kept a scrapbook about the people that he met and the things he discovered, and blow me down with a feather if I didn't find it. Yes, I did. And it was on the first day of April that I found it. And unkind people say, I bet he's making that up. But for 750 weeks in the pages of the Cambridge Weekly News, we shared the story of Mr. Pickwick's scrapbook. We discovered what happened when he visited. So play with me. It's 1838. You can't know about 1839. It hasn't happened yet. But you can know about the past, providing you meet people who can tell you. Now, Mr. Pickwick comes to Cambridge, but how does he get there? Well, obviously by stagecoach. But which stagecoach? So now you have to work through those street directories and county directories to find a list of the stagecoaches that ran from London to Cambridge. And if in Mr. Pickwick's scrapbook you find a picture of one, the Cambridge Telegraph, then that may be the one that he took. And if he took the Cambridge Telegraph coach, well, who was the driver? Well, the driver they talked about was Richard Vaughan, Hellfire Dick. Now, Richard Vaughan was a runt of a man, and the other stagecoach drivers, they mocked old Dick. They mocked everything about old Dick. There were two things they couldn't mock. One was the way he could spit across a room and hit the same spot 10 times out of 10. The other was the way he could handle that whip, because with that whip, he could take a fly from his wife's nose. Now, Dick was dead before Pickwick visited, but he was remembered. His memories were recorded by a friend, Nahum Noggins, in the Sporting Repository. Now, as you make that journey on that road from London, you pass through villages, and Pickwick, riding outside, was able to learn from the people that he sat with the story of some of the communities and some of the issues of 1838. But finally, they're nearing Cambridge. Now, Mr. Pickwick has a guidebook. Of course he has. But who'd need a modern guidebook in visiting an old town? So his book is a few years out of date. But as he makes that final approach to Cambridge from Trumpington, he begins to wonder if he's come to the right place. He's time to look around because the road is clogged by sheep. And who is that boy driving those sheep? That's John Brown. And how do you know it's John Brown? Because John Brown wrote an autobiography telling of his life and times and how he and his brother had the job of driving the sheep from St. Ives Market to the various butchers in the vicinity of Cambridge. And here we're paused outside the 1 mile post, that mile post erected by Dr. Hare and Mr. Mouse. And as you look across, Pickwick is surprised to see building, development in green fields. Immediately to the right, they're building a garden, a botanical garden. Because you see, Cambridge is expanding. And as Cambridge expands, the colleges need more room. And as the colleges need more room, they buy up any piece of land. And the Botanic Garden in Free School Lane can't expand. It can't expand, and it needs to, because of all the plants that are being built and brought back to Cambridge by people like Charles Darwin. So in the open fields off the Trumpington Road, they're building a botanic garden. And then beyond that, they're building a factory. No, it's a college. It's a new college. It's a Downing's college, funded by George Downing of London, who'd got money to spare and didn't want the government to get it. So he'd left it to various relatives, but they might die before he did. And if they all died, he'd leave it to Cambridge University and they could put up a college, which is what they'd done. But in 1838, there was great debate and discussion amongst the various dons. And beyond the college, there was yet more building, a new town. A new town, because this is 1838, and Cambridge University is expanding, and it needs more space. And any land that comes up for sale in Cambridge is bought by the university or colleges, but any land in Cambridge is lived on by townspeople who are turfed off and forced out to a new town around what is now the Catholic Church, a new town that was then called New Zealand, but they changed its name. Change was in the air. That new Downing's College was only part of what was happening. As Pickwick possessed further down Trumpington Street, he came across what looked like a Greek temple. Although, of course, no, it wasn't there in 1838. No, this was the planned new Fitzwilliam Museum. It was being talked about, but they hadn't quite got round to see. So this must have been an indication of what he would have expected to see in a year or two's time. And then further down, of course, you do find the old Cambridge, the oldest college, Peter House. And there's time to admire it because, of course, the coach is held up by more animals. These driven by John Brown's brother, down the Trumpington Street with the water flowing the channels on either side as it always has. No, it hasn't always done so. It used to run down the middle of the street, and it's only recently we've moved to the side. And Peter House might be Cambridge's oldest college, but it's building, because building is going on wholesale. And in the yard at the back of Peter House, almost overlooking their deer park, there is a new court being built. But at least in the distance, Pickwick can glimpse some of those old houses, those old jetted houses that stand on either side of the main street. Except, of course, by 1838, they'd gone. Those old houses on the corner of Silver Street had been replaced by a new factory. Or is it a church? No, it's a printing press. The university's Pitt Press. Cambridge is changing everywhere you look. There's activity. And already we can see that Cambridge has a vast number of pictures. We can actually catch a glimpse of what Cambridge was like But who are the people in the street? Who's the lady walking down? Well, she, I think, is an artist. I think she must be an artist because I think she's produced a picture, and this is her view of the other side of the street, of the church of St. Botolph's, with its high wall and with the pump which is dispensing water from below the level of the graveyard. And alongside it, a new college. No, that's an old college, but with a new name. That's St. Benet's College, now renamed Corpus Christi. A new college with a new front. Yeah, but how did the college afford to refront their old buildings? Well, the answer is that they were doing some work in the yard of the Eagle Inn, and the workmen struck a chest. When they opened the chest, it was full of gold. The workman said, "That's mine, I found it." The college said, "It's ours." They went to court, they got the contents. That chest helped build their new front to their college. And here, another stagecoach is paused. It's paused because, like every person who visits Cambridge, Cambridge needs somewhere for people to stay. And just a little bit further, you do have that new inn, that new Bull Inn, with its warm, cold, and hot and shower baths. Might that be a place that Pickwick would stay? No, Pickwick wouldn't stay at the Bull Inn, because the Bull Inn has a book club, and Bull Inn book club members are very sniffy about the quality of his book. They're all claiming that this new book by this chap called Nicholas Nickleby was far nicer. No, Pickwick wouldn't stay there. From the front of the Bull Hotel, you've got a glimpse of King's Parade, that oldest, quieter, but a King's Parade, which was active and noisy with traffic. And anyway, King's Parade was not old. They just knocked down old houses to build a brand new screen to the front of King's. Looking back in his guidebook, Pickwick sees that there used to be buildings between the front of King's College Chapel and King's Parade, the Provost's Lodge, but like so much else, by 1838, it had been swept away. Cambridge is changing in front of your eyes. There are some bits that stay old. The Church of Great St. Mary's, although that's been restored, and of course the Senate House, and Pickwick is going to learn in time what goes on in the Senate House. But just beyond that, there's a building that he would appreciate. The building on the corner of Trinity Street and Market Street, a book shop, one of the oldest bookshops in the world. Further on, we're into Trinity Street. Perhaps this is a place to stay. Perhaps the Blue Boar, an old established inn and coach house. He'd be right in the heart of Cambridge. Just outside his door, you've got that church, that old church of All Saints, with its archway under which you could shelter should the rain come down. But who are people in the street? There seem an awful lot of ladies in the street. And of course, there's an awful lot of undergraduates in the street. And one of the issues of 1838 is the way that they tended to mix, which was not something appreciated by the university. And of course, the university is comprised of young gentlemen learning to be doctors and lawyers, but they're not quite all as academic and some of them don't like the education that they're being offered. There's one named Beverly who goes to press describing some of the activities of Cambridge University and the corruption of the system, and how these young men, instead of studying, are fighting and whipping the chimney sweep boys with their horse whips. And of course, the amount of violence that's happening in Cambridge has increased recently in 1838 because of the streetlights. Before we had streetlights, we never had half the problems. You see, the streets of Cambridge were so dark, you couldn't see who was on the other side of the road. And if you couldn't see them, you couldn't fight them. But now we've got streetlights, you can see them, and fights do take place. And if that is the life of the undergraduate, well, what is the life of the Don? These highly academic gentlemen who are these old Dons were formerly young men who got high marks in their examination and were offered a fellowship of their college. A fellowship that effectively meant that they didn't need to worry ever again about their way of life. They would be looked after and fed and watered on the finest produce that the college could offer. They were there set up for life, and unless they did something daft, like get married and cease to be bachelor fellows. But what was it like on a top table? Yes, you're fed with all the finest, but you're sitting opposite that other old Don, that chap you didn't get on with when you first sat down there 40 years ago. When you start to investigate the story of the academics of Cambridge, it's something that makes Mr. Pickwick's scrapbook that little bit more interesting. And then you're out into St. John Street, and just around the corner, that building that you expect to see, that round church, there as it's been for centuries. Except, of course, the round church that we see is not the round church that Mr. Pickwick saw. It had since been changed. Looking again at the view of the street, you wonder just who the people are. What is their story? What is the story of the buildings? And you wonder, where still did Mr. Pickwick stay? Well, just down there, down Bridge Street, near the corner of Jesus Lane, you've got the Hoop Hotel. That famous Hoop Hotel mentioned in poetry. That Hoop Hotel where you could expect good food, good dinners, good ale. But Pickwick would not stay here because the Hoop Hotel is a coaching inn. And you know what happens in a coaching inn. You've just gone to bed and there's another stagecoach arriving and the slamming of the doors and the horses are winnowing and it's making noise. No, Pickwick would not stay in a coaching inn. Others did. And one of those who did was Jemmy Gordon. Jemmy Gordon was a Cambridge character. Sometimes he wore a red coat and he was General Gordon. Other times he wore a blue coat and he was Admiral Gordon. At all times he was drunk. Jemmy was a notorious Cambridge drunk. But Jemmy was a scholar. Jemmy had knowledge. An undergraduate with a Latin essay to write turned to Jemmy because Jemmy could write the best essay that there was. You needed just to encourage him a bit. And Jemmy didn't need much encouraging. Jemmy knew the scandal of everybody. One night, Jemmy comes home to the Hoop Hotel. He doesn't actually stay in the hotel, he stays in the loft above the stables at the back. As he approaches his lofty home, he sees the ladder that he needs to climb, but there are two of them. He climbs the wrong one. He ends up in a heap on the floor, bawling out that he's hurt his shoulder. So what do you do with a drunk with a broken shoulder? Well, you pick him up and you put him on a shutter and you carry him here to Addenbrooke's Hospital, supported by voluntary contributions. Supported by voluntary contributions, including donations from Botel, the bookseller who built those two new wings on either side. Supported by contributions from people like the man who produced this engraving that shows not only the hotel, but some of the folk who make use of it. So what is it like to be unwell in Cambridge? What is it like to be on crutches? And Pickwick discovers some of this because he twists his ankle and needs to find his way round Cambridge in a bath chair, being pushed by a chimney sweep boy. Oh, there's so much to learn in Mr. Pickwick's scrapbook. But for the most part, with Jemmy Gordon, you carry him to the hospital. And the receptionist says, he can't come here. To come here, you've got to be known and recommended by one of the people who've subscribed. Excuse me, matron, can I have a look at this list of your subscribers? Yeah, I thought so. Jemmy Gordon knows scandal about all the people on this list. There's not one person on this list that won't recommend Jemmy. Oh, in that case, he knows somebody important. Oh, that's different. Has he got any money? No, he ain't got. That's all right, because you can't come to Addenbrooke's Hospital if you've got money. That's for people who ain't got none. Is he clean? Well, he did fall in the. Oh, well, he's all right. He's not too dirty, and he does know somebody important. Then he can come in, of course he can. Yeah, bring him back on Wednesday. No, we only take him in on Wednesdays. So if you can't take your drunk to Addenbrooke's Hospital, supported by voluntary contributions, you take him to Cambridge Workhouse, supported by involuntary contributions. Mr. Bumble the Beadle, pushing the poor through the doors. No fathers allowed here for bastards. Is that Oliver Twist? And what was it like to be poor in Cambridge in 1838? It was horrendous, because the world's changed. A few years earlier, if you'd been born in a parish and you grew up in a parish and you married in a parish and you got old in the parish, when you got old, the parish looked after you. You went to the overseer of the poor. You touched your forelock. Excuse me, overseer, me and my wife, we worked as hard as we can all week and we can't afford a loaf of bread. And the overseers would have said, oh, that's all right, my man, the parishioners here are collected. Here's a shilling, you can afford a loaf of bread. And you touch your head to the overseer. And, thank you, overseer, I will work harder next week, and so will my wife. But that was all right, except you knew behind you in the queue was old Bert. And old Bert had never done a day's work in his life, but Bert knew the rules and regulations. That's me again, overseer. I'm entitled to 16 bob. 16 bob, thank you. See you next week. And Bert had all the hints. You ought to do what I do, boy. You ought to buy to grow children. The more children you have, the more you'll get. You get enough kids, them kids will look after you. It wouldn't happen now. It did happen then. And of course, this is 1838, and the Napoleonic War has left so many old soldiers and so many scroungers that the social services system can't cope. So the government has stepped in and brought in work houses. Now, if you want relief, you went into the workhouse for it. But that impacted on the true poor. Me and my wife, we've been together now for 50 years and we can't cope like we used to. And you say, I'm got to go into the workhouse and I'm got to live in a room with 12 old men and my darling wife, and we've never been parted, she's got to live in a room with 12 old women and we'll only see each other on Sundays. It's causing outrage that's been manifested by that vicar at Bourne, the Reverend Mabberley, who's led protests about the coming of these new union workhouses with mass meetings on Parker's Piece and St Ives and Huntingdon, which has caused the magistrates to send to London for troops for fear that they're going to pull down these new bastions, these new workhouses. No, the life of the poor, as Pickwick will discover, is not a happy one. But in the meantime, Mr. Pickwick is still looking for somewhere to stay. He turns to Petty Curie, looking down towards the marketplace. And there on the left, there's that wonderful building with its overhanging jetties and its car. It's a hotel, it's the Wrestlers Inn. And Mr. Pickwick turns to the Wrestlers Inn, but is there that he meets that villain who steals his money, that leaves Pickwick destitute in the streets of Cambridge, still looking for somewhere to stay. Next to the Wrestlers Inn, there's the Lion Hotel. And next to the Lion Hotel, the Falcon Inn. Perhaps this is somewhere for Pickwick. It's got the atmosphere, it's got the character, it's got the yard, the Falcon Yard, where the players in Elizabethan times would have performed, and it is a popular place to stay. Well, it must be a popular place to stay, because lots of people stay there. In many parts of the town of Cambridge, the dwellings of the poor are in a disgraceful condition. The worst of these is the Falcon Yard. In one of the houses I visited, there were 13 families residing. In a room on one of the floor lived a man, his wife, and 5 children. The eldest boy was 16 years of age, the eldest girl a little over 14, having been for several months a common prostitute. The number of persons residing in this yard, I was informed, was 300. There are 2 privies. Those who have back windows to their room are in the habit of throwing all their refuse out of the windows onto a large dung heap in the Red Lion Yard, in the heart of Cambridge. The yard that we now call Lion Yard, just yards from the marketplace. A marketplace that has changed totally since Pickwick's time. Indeed, the only thing that you now recognise are the spires of King's College Chapel. But what is the story of the marketplace? What is this building, this structure, this Hobson's conduit? Who are these people that are shopping? Who are the people that are manning the stalls? What are they selling? So you meet the stallholders who'll tell you how people will come to buy last thing at night before they close down. but they'll also tell you that just before they close down, it's dark. And when it's dark, you can't see what you're buying, and nor can you smell it because of the stench from those heaps of skin at the back of the building on this side, which is the Shire Hall. And behind the Shire Hall, there's a guild hall, crammed into this narrow L-shaped marketplace with buildings on the right-hand side, which, if Pickwick was to know it, would burn down in that great fire in 1849. But it's there that Pickwick meets a man in a red coat. And it's not Jemmy Gordon. It's Thomas Moore. Thomas Moore is the Cambridge bell man, employed by the corporation to give out notices. But Thomas Moore knows all about the Corporation of Cambridge, the corruption of the Corporation of Cambridge, how councillors are selling off council property to their friends, how council elections are corrupted and parliamentary elections are corrupted with bribery wholesale, and how after every parliamentary election there are inquiries where government inspectors talk to ordinary folk and ask how much they have been paid for their vote. No, through people like Thomas Moore, you can learn so much about so many aspects of Cambridge life. And of course, Thomas can recommend where to stay. And he would recommend the Castle Inn. Not the Castle Inn on Castle Hill overlooking the jail where villains are hanged, is a public display of no, this is the Castle Inn on Regent Street overlooking Parker's Piece. It's a wonderful place. It's a wonderful place where real people gather, where farmers leave their carts when they come to Cambridge. It's a place where you can get good food and good drink without being charged the world for it. It's a place where good company is assured. It's a hotel that years later is going to burn down. It's going to burn down and be replaced by a cinema, the Regal Cinema. Now, you've probably been to the Regal Cinema. And if you have, you'll know that when you left, across the road is Emmanuel College. And Emmanuel College, of course, gives Pickwick lots more to explore. But if that is Emmanuel College, then this must be the view from the hotel. And if this is the view from the hotel, then what is that? That is Pickwick's luggage. There is the suitcase, which I discovered and opened up and found crammed with so many memories of Cambridge and its characters. And how did it get left behind? Well, going through the suitcase, I found another piece of paper. It's an invitation to a party that had taken place on Parker's Piece, just across the road, in June of 1838. A party for 15,000 people. A dinner, an open dinner to 15,000 people. Where did they get the chairs? Where did they get the table? Where did they get the meat? Where did they get the beer? How was it organised? And Pickwick will learn all of this from one of the men who took part in the scheme, who organised and tried to record it. He recorded it because he would then be allowed to write the official record of the coronation party for Queen Victoria. Only when he finally turned to the committee changed their minds. No, you're not going to write it. And Thomas Halligan said, in that case, this here minute book's my property. I wrote it, I'm going to keep it. Which is why you have two accounts of the same event, putting slightly different slants on Cambridge's history, which is what Mr. Pickwick is about. One part of that celebration was a balloon ascent. Now, when Mr. Green Senior went up in his coronation balloon, he went up on horseback. Now, I think Mr. Pickwick met Mr. Green. Mr. Green said to Mr. Pickwick, I'm about to go up, but I have got to pop behind the hedge before I go. Would you mind hanging on to the bridle? Now, I've had a hot air balloon ascent. I took it as my leaving present from the library 25 years ago. I thought it would remind me of all those management meetings. And I know that one minute you're on the ground and the next minute you're above the hedges. And the next minute you're above the trees. And I'm fairly sure that Mr. Pickwick floated off on his aeronautical pony. And as he drifted up, he could look down on Cambridge, a Cambridge that is continuing to expand as he looks across the open fields to Chesterton, fields which are even now starting to grow up with new houses as a result of enclosure. There's the work that's taking place on the new lock at Jesus Green to help with the barge trade. And barge trade, of course, is something so important to Cambridge, and Mr. Pickwick is going to meet the men who take the barges and follow their route down to the sea at King's Lynn through the fens. But for the moment, he's drifting away. And as he drifts away, people come running out and they look up into the sky and say, oh, look, a flying horse. And from that basket, things drop. They go running out and find mice on parachutes. And when the aeronaut gets into the sky, he decants air to a bottle that he brings down for the chemist to analyse. And all that truly happens. Now, you know and I know that everything that goes up must come down. And when Pickwick floated down to earth, in the place that you know best, what did he find? When he walked down your high street in 1838, what did he see that is still there? Who were the people that he met? What was their story? It's a fascinating way to look at our local history. And for 750 weeks, we followed Mr. Pickwick. We learned the story of the prostitute, the story of the bargee, the story of the don, the story of the policeman. It's kept me amused for many a week, and it gives us an insight. Now, Mr. Pickwick's scrapbook appeared in the Cambridge Weekly News week by week. But it's also here on your computer, because every episode has been uploaded amongst the hundreds of documents that are now uploaded onto Internet Archive. You can click on it and get Mr. Pickwick's scrapbook. You can touch a page and the page will turn. You can ask it for stories of Sawston or Ely or Fendit, and I tell you, it's an interesting way to spend a few minutes during this period of lockdown. And Mr. Pickwick's scrapbook is serialized day after day on Facebook in Mr. Pickwick's Cambridge Scrapbook Facebook group. And Mr. Pickwick's Facebook group is just one. The main group is the Fenland History on Facebook. Every day on Fenland History on Facebook, I share stories of what is happening on this day in some year past, between 1897 and 1990. It's just, again, one of those hundreds of documents that are here on this machine that you can use. Everything that you read in Pickwick's scrapbook truly happened. Everything that you've seen in Pickwick's scrapbook is here on your machine for you to use. So thank you for allowing me to share something of Pickwick with you. Do follow me on Facebook. Until we meet again, bye-bye.